So, I'm interested in the Cooperation Databank, and I'm basically curious, like, how you got to work on that. So if we can maybe talk a bit about, like, your career so far, whatever you want to call it. I can't remember, was your bachelor's in psychology or?
Yes. So actually, like, my background led me very naturally to this new position as a postdoc here at the VU. And for example, I did my bachelor in Palermo. That's super south Italy, and I did my bachelor like running an experiment on the bystander effect. Actually, a replication study. It was really something
which effect?
The bystander effect.
Oh, bystander. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all related to the prosociality and prosocial behavior. So since the very beginning. Then I moved for my master to focus a little bit more on research, and I did a master that was like focused on psychology, but also had some computer science notions, or a lot of data analysis, and so on and so forth. That really brought me to my PhD. I did my PhD in Torino, at University of Turin in the north of Italy. And my PhD was in social psychology, but I also attended some course on anthropology and education. So I can say I have a PhD in psychology, anthropology, and education very broadly. But let's say psychology then.
Yeah. By the way, you'll be the second guest from who you studied in Turin.
Oh, really?
I have. Yeah, the next episode is going to be with Bianca Trovo. I think she's from Turin. I can't remember. It's funny just because I was just finished editing her episode, so I hear I'm not going to hear a lot of Italian accents right now. It's just, yeah. But you're not from Turin, or?
No. I'm from Palermo.
From Palermo, okay, yeah. And wait, how does psychology? Well, what is a psychology degree like in Italy? So in the UK, it's where I did psychology as for my bachelor's. It's pretty formalized. So if you do a like psychology bachelor's, like the first 2 years is like, I think pretty much wherever you do it, it's the same thing. You have like some methods, and you have like one module on the different topics. You have like something about like clinical psychology. You have something on cognition. Like you go through like the whole thing. Is it similar there? Or?
In Italy, the bachelor is pretty much organized in the same way. So it's pretty general and broad. And then for your master, that takes like 2 years, you decide how you want to specialize and what you want to focus on.
And why did you go to Turin and do that degree?
Because they had a very unique program that was not, of course, you want to specialize at the master, but what I knew is that I wanted to do research. And in Italy, there is nothing like a research master. So that was like the closest thing that was at that time out there. Because it was general and still general enough to allow you to pursue many different career options. And I like that.
I think that's why a lot of people do psychology, right? Because it doesn't force you to, do one thing or something.
Yeah.
At least That's why I took it. Like you feel like you can do whatever you want with it.
Then you realize that it is not that easy. So
the degree or the
that you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it seems that you were like pretty focused in that regard, right? Like in terms of working on cooperation and social interactions.
Exactly. So also like my master thesis, for example, cooperation is not a research tradition at University of Turin, but my master thesis was on the effect of priming on cooperation, like priming of trust on cooperation. And so I really started pretty early on with these.
Do you think that's a good thing? Or, I mean, for example, I almost took the opposite approach, where it seems like every half year I'd work on a different research project. Like when I started my PhD, which is on like cognitive neuroscience of social interactions, let's say. Like I worked on attention. I did a project there. I did something on, I did actually do one cooperation thing before. I did volition for one of my master's projects. For another, I did like theoretical neurobiology. For another, I did body ownership. Like I went like all over the place basically. And in some sense, I think like it's, the nice thing there is that you have this like breadth of overview over different topics. But of course, like when I then started my PhD, I had almost no specific knowledge about the topic. So I don't know, like in hindsight, are you glad you focused on one thing and stuck to it? Or would you have preferred to, I don't know, do some other stuff? Or
Well, it's of course it's a trade-off because it's very efficient and it can allow you really to go in depth in that research topic. And for the PhD, that's super convenient because you don't have most of the times all the time in the world to perform your literature search and so on and so forth. But okay, yeah, sure, I was focused on something, but during my PhD, I also did like other projects that were unrelated to my dissertation, and they were pretty, yeah, they were not related on cooperation at all. So like if you see now a paper that I published with a student of mine, we analyze women self-objectification in response of seeing advertisement in Sweden and Italy of menstrual product. So there is it's pretty far from cooperation, I can say.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially asking like the focus versus breadth thing, because, we once had someone we supervised for their bachelor's project in our lab. And then there was a question whether they wanted to also do their master's project. And I always felt like, almost felt like telling them like, no, don't do like your project in the same lab twice. Like go somewhere else, like, experience what kind of research you can do. Don't just, I mean, we're of course a very good lab and very cool, but like go out and do other things. Don't just, focus so early. But yeah, I don't know.
Oh, makes sense. Makes complete sense. So, for example, what I did for my PhD to reach some kind of trade-off also here was like to visit other departments as well. So, like I spent some months at University of Vienna, in the Department of Economic Psychology, and at the very end of my PhD, I spent some months as well at the Free University. Yeah, okay, that was maybe more related to my dissertation, but still you could really experience different stuff.
How did you end up in Vienna briefly, or what were you doing there?
I did a series of studies that they end up in my dissertation eventually, and that specific research group that I was visiting was working on a model on the tax compliance, and that pretty much resembled another way to study public goods. That was like way different from what I was used to do in the lab. So I thought that was pretty cool. And even if we didn't focus on taxes eventually, it turned out to be interesting.
But how did you make that connection or get there? Like, did you find them and say this is cool, or was there? Yeah,
exactly as you say. It was not a connection that we had before. Like I read some papers and I found them cool, and I just contacted the people. They were pretty welcoming, I must say.
Okay, and that was just easy to do as part of your PhD, or did you have to take time out, or?
No, that was a part of my PhD, and that was pretty much encouraged at University of Turin to do.
Yeah, I'm still considering doing something like that. But in a way, we did like a study on COVID. I'm going to upload the second version of the preprint today, once we're finished.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
So in a way, like I feel like I've already done my like non-PhD work, even though I didn't meant to spend as much time on it. But yeah, it always depends on like how much time you have for your PhD, how much money you have, that kind of stuff. But the thing, so if I read it correctly, when you went to Amsterdam, that was already in the same lab you're in right now, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Although when I went to Amsterdam, I was visiting Professor Paul van Lange, and we were working on a different topic. So we were trying to come up with an experimental paradigm to study the effect of corruption on cooperation and trust. So that was what I was doing there. So I was not working directly with Dan Balliet, who is the PI in my lab right now.
So that was more coincidence that you were already in Amsterdam, or?
Completely.
I see. It sounded like when I saw your CV or whatever, it looked like you did like a brief internship with Daniel Bayet, and then afterwards went like, oh, can I do a postdoc? Okay. So that was completely different. Okay, so let's move slightly closer towards the Cooperation Databank. How did you get your current position as a postdoc?
So actually, the Databank project started way earlier than I joined the lab. So I think 3 years was already out there for 3 years, and people were working on it. So there was a transition time in which they opened a position to find another person to be in charge of the annotation of the literature and on the training of other people. And as I said, I was there working on other topics on cooperation, and I applied to the position. So that's how I transitioned to this new job. But at the beginning, it looked very different from what it turned out eventually, because my responsibility was mostly to work very closely to the data.
Rather than, or what did you expect to do?
Yeah, rather than building the entire infrastructure and bringing it to the next level,
Because that had already been done, or?
No, because the entire project started with annotation of papers. So what we did was to search and collect these studies on human cooperation using economic games, and to annotate really in depth whatever was going on in there. So in terms of how these experiments were structured, the variables that were in there, and the findings. So this is how it started. There was no platform, no research interface, no logical and representation.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask this later, but I guess because you just mentioned all the annotating, that sounds like a lot of very tedious work. Is it as tedious, let's say, as it sounds, or you had lots of people, right? It wasn't just you doing all of those studies, but
I worked really full time on the annotation, at least for my very first year. So
okay.
I can, so I know what I'm talking about. Yes, it's a very detail-oriented kind of task, and like to give you to give you an example, to annotate a relatively straightforward study, let's say a study that was conducted by psychologists and published in a psychology journal, can take half an hour for a single study. So
that's like a straightforward study where you
a straightforward study in which you know exactly what is going on and you know where to find and to look for the information.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we maybe then introduce what we're actually talking about here? So what is the Cooperation Databank? What can it do? What problem does it solve?
Okay, so we can, I think we can define the Cooperation Databank as a machine-readable and annotated body of data that we extracted and curated from studies on human cooperation that use economic games. So when this project started, the main purpose was to give the possibility to everyone who's interested in cooperation to perform meta-analysis and to get research synthesis on this specific topic. But then, it really got bigger than that, and it allowed to perform many more functions and to accommodate more. Yeah, to accommodate more than this.
What do you mean by more than this? Then
because what we realized, so for us, the original group started as a group of people who were mainly interested in meta-analysis. So we know how it works, like when you code a paper or you annotate that, and so on and so forth. So we were pretty much oriented toward that. When we had this large body of annotated data and we had to fit it into like some formal data model to structure this knowledge that for us was like really Excel files with a lot of data, we realized that nothing similar was already out there that was able to model really this kind of information. So what the next step of the project was try to really find a formal way to represent this knowledge and this information, because we were doing that in a very intuitive meta-analysis oriented way, like researchers would do.
You mentioned machine readable earlier. What exactly does that mean?
This comes from the idea that all the knowledge that is contained in these studies is actually buried into these PDFs. So, like if you open an article and you want to understand immediately what is going on, what are the findings and the characteristics, there is no way for machines to extract this information for you. So, what we wanted to create was a way to annotate the data and to formalize this knowledge that machines could read, and you could perform some kind of operations on.
Mm-hmm. But that means then, for example, like you say, let's say you take one paper and you say, okay, here we had 24 people, 50% male, cooperation rate of whatever, that kind of stuff, right? That's what you mean?
Yeah, that's correct.
You kind of pull out the relevant information, or...
Exactly, but even if you have this PDF with a research article, let's say, and you want to look for the percentage of males in the sample, how would you even look for it in your document? You're gonna think of some keywords like gender, male, female, and just jump from result to result in your document. So this is not an efficient way. This is not really read. But if you annotate this information and you formalize that, it becomes easier to extract the information directly.
Do you mean by that like having a big Excel spreadsheet and putting it like each row is a study, or how should I imagine this?
Yeah, that's correct. So you can this is what happens if you download, for example, the data going into the Cooperation Databank research platform. If you download the data, you can then navigate them in an Excel spreadsheet form. And so this kind of file is going to have a lot of columns. There are going to be all the variables that are in there. So there's going to be one column about gender, and you can directly check this information. But if you want, you can also retrieve the same information from the interface and the platform.
Yeah, you mean like the website, the way of the thing, yeah. Yeah, so is the idea then kind of the overall idea to allow other peoples to do meta-analyses just easily? Is that kind of the basic idea, or?
That's correct. That was the vision that Dan Balliet had at the beginning of the project, because he ran many meta-analyses and published many meta-analyses in his career, and he was well aware that although meta-analysis is often sold as a kind of an easy way to get a paper published, and because you don't really need to run the study, it's just like a use and recycling of secondary data. It's not easy at all, and it's very elitarian because it takes a lot of time, and it's not true that all the research groups and all the labs in the world actually have this time and resource. So what he had in mind is really to build this kind of resource that would allow everyone to do that and everyone to have access to the same knowledge.
Yeah, I have to admit, every time I see a meta-analysis, I always assume or like when people do lots of meta-analysis, I know this is wrong, but I always think it's just easy way to get lots of citations. But obviously it's not. It's lots of work to actually do this.
Yeah, it takes some time, let's say. But that's true. That's really a common prejudice.
It's kind of like, I'm really glad that you made this data bank, because I had this one idea that I tested experimentally in the lab, and we had a few experiments, or maybe I'll back up a bit. I've always been interested in from a practical perspective, what payoff matrix do you use when you do a prison's dilemma, for example? Because there's no guideline here are the relevant factors for using a payoff matrix. It's just everyone just uses a payoff matrix, and sometimes it's specific to the experiment, there's specific reasons within the experiment, but often it's just kind of arbitrary. Anyway, so I was thinking about that, and then so I started writing down different payoff matrices, from all the papers I came across. So now I have this like Word document with a table in it that has, it started off just like very casually, me just going, oh, I'll just write down what they did. And now I have this thing with like 200 payoff matrices or something stupid, because every time I read one, I just add it to it. And it's kind of nice that people like you are doing this in a more systematic way, so it's just not a Word document on my laptop. But I will say this, you don't have payoff matrix in there, right?
Yes, that's correct. You're right. We don't code for the specific payoff.
And why not? That's the one thing I want.
That's a very good question. Although I'm very optimistic this will be integrated soon, because some people are already working on annotating that for some studies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm optimistic it's going to be included.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, there's a few things you could be interested in there, of course. The one thing I'm interested in particular is the kind of gain loss of individual payoffs. So not whether everything is gain or loss, right? You already have that in your study, the gain loss frame. But what I'm more interested in is like, you can, because in a prisoner's dilemma, the order of the 4 payoffs is, that's what defines the prisoner's dilemma. But you can obviously shift all of that relative to 0. So none or all of them or some of them are positive or negative. And the one thing that I found, for example, interesting in my very professional table in my Word document is that there's almost no payoff matrices that use negative numbers at all. I found that really interesting. You give people money, it makes sense in these studies, but there's almost like the proportion of what I wrote down is probably like 90% use only positive numbers or something. Yeah. So like I wanted to see whether I could do meta-analysis over this, but there just weren't enough studies I even knew of that have negative numbers to begin with.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it's true. I mean, if I have to come up with a proportion as well, I think that the positive payoff are around 85% of what's out there. So it's really more like the norm.
I mean, as I said, like it makes sense from a practical perspective, right? Because you want to incentivize it, so you give people more money. Like one problem we had is that you can't really like let people give you money for taking part. Like if you do a real prisoner's dilemma and the outcome is negative, you can't really do a study where the participant owes you 20 euros afterwards, right? Like that doesn't.
But I can tell you from experience that there are several studies that, for example, give a budget before to cover this kind of loss.
Yeah, that's what we did basically.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, that's like the only thing you can really do. Yeah, I mean, it just also like for me, not even like I know of. Yeah, it just feels really unethical to have people to give you like an hour of their time and then they have to give you 10 euros afterwards or something. Like that just sounds a bit wrong.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's already hard enough to give them back because you as a participant you think they're already in your pocket, So yeah.
I mean, we had like an hour thing. We did an experiment. There were like 3 factors, and each of them you could win or gain money, that kind of thing. And one person just got really unlucky, which is what you'd imagine if you test lots of people, right? At some point, someone's going to get very unlucky. One person also got very lucky and took away a lot of money. But you feel really bad for that person who gives you, well, that's the weird thing, right? Technically, we paid them less than they should have been paid per hour, right? Because of the incentive structure and the whole thing. It's just this one, we didn't really expect someone to be that unlucky and get like the minimum in all 3 tasks. But I mean, they signed up for it. We told them like in the advertisement, like it's not like this was hidden, but yeah, it still always feels a bit bad. But yeah, so it's okay. I'm looking forward then to once you add that to the data bank, because I mean, like so I had a look at it, like briefly look through it, and it seems like it's set up the way you'd want it to be set up. That you do 5 clicks and then you've got your data. So that would make everything so much easier. But like, was your task literally for the last year to just code studies, or what? Like,
no, that was my task for the very first year, in which like I transitioned to this new job. And to be honest, It's okay. It's a tedious task, and it's very detail oriented, but it gives a lot of benefit. Like okay, talk about it takes half an hour. You need to look a lot of to a lot of detail. It's more than this, really, because you get really into the specifics of the experiment in a way you never had a chance to. Like before, we were saying. That maybe sometimes when you do your PhD, it's hard to read a lot of paper and you really need to be efficient with that somehow. But if you read a lot of paper just to annotate them and to understand what was going on, you really get a level of detail you would never expect.
It's funny, you must be like, when it comes to experimental details, you must be like a complete expert in terms of like knowing not necessarily every detail, every study or everything, but like just knowing what people have done before, right?
It's funny because you start knowing people from their design, and you start, or for example, this is a funny story, but sometimes there are some papers that I really like to code and to annotate, of some specific research group. I always thought, yeah, one day I really like to end up to work with them. That's the way it should be done. So it starts really this little fandom and this little connections, totally unilateral though.
Yeah, I mean, do you plan on, like, when you think about like the rest of your, not the rest of your career, that's a very grand term, but like about like what you want to do kind of next, is for you like the whole, are you going to use this kind of fairly detailed knowledge of experimental methods more, or is I don't know, like, do you see yourself as like experimental mainly, or?
Yeah, so I definitely like experiments, and I think I will continue to perform more in the future. Although one drawback, let's call it in this way, of working with such a project is that it's so big and so long-term oriented that everything else really at some point feel like really minor. Like if you make a contribution, if you really make a contribution in the field. Then coming back and scale down to perform individual studies that maybe are not going to make a revolution in the field. It's a bit strange, but I really love experiments, so I'm gonna keep on doing more. But I also got this vision for long-term things and long-term projects. So basically, all the projects I'm involved right now, been like 2 or 3 years in the making, are just super long things. Yeah.
Do you like that kind of work? Like studies that really take their time, or like just as a comparison, like I really noticed like for what I consider doing like animal studies and that kind of thing, because I'm also like really interested in neuroscience, but I realized, I mean, I never really applied for it, but I realize now that I'm just not suited for something where you have to train the animals for months. Then like these studies that just take like 3 years to do or something. Like I'm just not suited for that kind of pace.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of patience and perseverance. So it really needs to fit with the way you approach work and with your personality too. So I realize I like that, and yeah, this is not much of a problem for me, except maybe in some specific times in my life, I wish just I had more things in the pipeline, or they're just faster. But still, like for most of the time, no, it's okay. I like it, and I think they're going to be rewarding in the future in terms of the contribution that they can make.
Yeah, I mean, like if I don't know, I haven't used this really yet to like do a proper analysis, but like if it works well, then you've created a framework for not any meta-analysis you might want to do, but yeah, you've like facilitated for so many people how to do these kind of analyses. And I mean, as a side point, I also realize it's a good search engine, right? Like when you go through, I usually look through Google Scholar because that's just by far what gives me the best results. But like, for example, for this loss gain thing where I really wanted to find studies that looked at this, and because I thought someone must have done this, and some have, but not really the way I intended to. I went through like all the database, and it was like a huge effort, and still like I just in 2 minutes looked through your gain loss thing and found like 3 studies I hadn't seen until then, even though in theory I thought I'd gone through all these databases.
That's very encouraging to know, but it's true. Like we always give like a huge focus to the meta-analytic side of things and to the possibility to perform research synthesis. But the search engine and even just using Coda to search, to screen for papers, it's super helpful. Like there are so many things you can do, especially as an early career person, as a person who really haven't planned thousands of studies in the career. I think Coda is super valuable. There are really many things.
Yeah. I mean, what I find interesting, and I don't know like whether something like Coda exists or something like that, but Coda being the Cooperation Databank. But the one thing I find interesting as an idea is that because you have already coded all these variables and seems like you're adding more as, in the future, it almost seems to me like it works as like you can almost like for many things that you're studying, you could make meta-analysis a part of your standard paper. Like, you can almost like for me, for example, let's say I do this one study and then I can add a thing at the end to it. I don't know how much work it is. Maybe it's a huge amount of work still, but it kind of seems like, back in, without Coda, it's a whole new project to do this thing. Whereas now it becomes like something smaller on the side almost, it seems. I don't know whether it works that way.
It looks like pretty much like all the studies, like the experimental studies that also in the paper report, let's say, some analysis of survey data. Because you can, like a World Value Survey or European Social Survey, it's not something that was collected firsthand, but it still like can make the argument stronger and provide a cross-validation of what you want to claim.
Yeah, I mean, are you still working mainly on Coda then, or are you doing experiments right now, or what are you?
No, right now, like I'm not really focused on annotating. I'm not annotating any new data at the moment because it was like really, really intense. So I'm transitioning to some research project I can do with this data. So, for example, I'm working on my own meta-analysis on cross-cultural variation in cooperation, and on some other experiments that are not really related to Coda per se.
So you're not like doing that thing where you could almost use it as I don't know. I was about to say like you can almost use it as a pilot for the study you want to do, but then again, if you already can do a meta-analysis, I wonder whether your new experiment is going to add much if it's already coded in there. I don't know.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I was thinking like if there's already so much data out there that you can do new meta-analysis, do you really need your new study? Like maybe no, I guess you can. Yeah, like for my study, the data is already in your database, but no one's actually looked at the question I'm interested in. So yeah, it would still work. Do you see what I mean? Or
I think it still has value. It really depends on how you exactly want to frame reporting a meta-analytic results in your paper. It really depends, but I don't see them as mutually exclusive things, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, once you've got your payoff matrix coded in there, I'll definitely see whether I can make something of it.
But you're very welcome to join our task force and annotate some payoff matrices with us.
Let's say this. I'll say this. I'm very happy to add our studies to it.
Okay.
If that's, so this is the next point I wanted to ask. Actually, is that you mentioned, I think in your preprint briefly somewhere, that the idea is that new papers are added to it. And I'm assuming from your perspective, ideally by the authors, so you don't have to do it. But no, I think this is a great idea, right? You have something where you create the framework that hopefully is easy enough for researchers to use so they can just add new studies. That would be fantastic for you, right? You'd have hundreds of new studies every year just being added.
I can already anticipate something about that. We're working already on the implementation of such a feature in the data bank. So we're working on including a new tab in the Coda research platform in which people can add their own studies. Of course, following a little bit the treatment structure and the data model that is underlying our computations. But of course, we're going to provide instruction for that. And this is already in beta version. So we're testing that now, and we plan it to release pretty soon. And okay, as I said, of course, this is going to alleviate a lot the work of the people who are going to annotate all of them. But the very cool thing is that if the authors can annotate themselves the study they perform, they're going to provide the most accurate information, like really the best information. And I think it has a lot of value. And another thing is that the studies that we were able to include were published studies that we were able to find online through the popular search engines. But there are many more like out there. They remain unpublished somehow, and they deserve to be represented. So that's a way to do that. So we're planning to welcome really unpublished studies and file drawer studies and theses, and really to be able to represent as much as possible.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Like even if, but like if you have a file drawer thing, how do you guarantee that people are putting in the accurate information? Like if it's not, because if you have a paper, you can just check the paper and see like, oh yeah, they did it correctly. But let's say you have someone who hasn't used Coda yet, and they say, oh, I have this file drawer study, I'll put it in. And you have no way of verifying it from a paper or something, or do you just have to trust them, or?
So everything, we're planning to review every entry and every new record by our editorial board of Coda, but of course there are some details that we can't. We should rely on authors. So let's say if the people report the participants in the study were playing a prisoner dilemma game, even if we review this content, we have no way to say that in the study that we never read anywhere they were actually playing another game. So this information is going to be. We should trust the authors to report like accurate information, but from our side, we're gonna make the process of adding the information in terms of defining the treatment, defining the variables, of fitting our data model as smooth as possible. So we're really gonna help for that.
Yeah, I'm just like thinking out loud now about like how to make this easier for you. Because, yeah, as you said, like you probably have to like check papers so people don't just put in nonsense and just ruin your entire database through poor data quality. But would you like have, I don't know, give certain authors, if they've already done it 2 or 3 times and they seem to know what they're doing, like giving them like not a certificate, but like a green card to just like put in their data because they know what they're doing? Or are you still going to intend on actually checking through everything?
You mean like introducing some sort of reputation system?
Not exactly. I mean, but you know what I mean, right? Like the kind of, you say like, okay, this person has put it in like 3 times correctly or something. Like they seem to, we don't, it's kind of just wasting it.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. No, we're gonna basically give ask authors to also leave their like contact information. So if we see something that does not add up, or if there is something that we would like to follow up with authors, we're gonna contact them and just have a one-to-one conversation to clarify. But yeah, no green card. I'm so sorry. The incentive structure.
Yeah, you could put it like in your CV. I got like, I've got a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, and I got a certificate from the Coda.
Or some cool stickers in your laptop.
That would be very good. I'm not joking. That would probably like increase like the amount of studies people put in by like 50% if they could have a cool sticker. Yeah, but how do you know how like Daniel, so like, it runs through him, right? Because he had the ERC grant or whatever it was to do this thing. Like, how does he plan on doing this long term? Because it sounds like even, if you want to add new studies, it's going to be at least some effort involved for, well, however long he wants to keep this up. But, grants are not unlimited. So like, how does he plan on ensuring like the longevity of the project?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So even so, as you said, the project was originally funded by the ERC starting grant. It was awarded to them budget, and many people worked to make that possible and to annotate data, and many of those people were actually volunteer, and they really saw some kind of benefit into the project. They saw that they could make a difference, and some of them really wanted to get closer to the data to do their own project with that. Even annotating more data that didn't end up in the Cooperation Databank eventually. So many people really contributed to that. We have some people that are starting to reach out to keep on contributing more in some capacities. So all those people, they didn't really have to annotate thousands of papers. Was maybe what they had the time for. Was like a summer project or something like this. So we're trying to acquire some other external funding, and we're applying to some grants to have it, to keep that running. So we're going to base on the money from these grants that hopefully will come, and from some other work from people who believe in the project right now. But we're also trying to invest in some ways to automatize some of the processes, because right now at the moment there is nothing that is comparable in terms of data quality to the information that a domain expert annotator can annotate. So if the two of us read a paper, we're always going to perform better than some machine in extracting the same information and understanding what is going on in the experimental game. But there are some tasks like the systematic search for studies that can be automatized, or at least semi-automatized, through some methods like machine learning, let's say, that can learn from our previous work and support us to retrieve helpful papers or relevant records, let's say. So we're investing in that and in trying to understand how much we can, whether machines can help us, to increase the efficiency of the entire process.
Yeah, I mean, I guess relying on other researchers, I don't know, to some extent, of course, relying on other people's help is maybe not the greatest idea. Should only rely on it, right? But in a way, also, it does seem very. I could imagine it working from the sense, I have with the payoff matrix thing, I have all these payoff matrices, so I can, I can just take the stuff I already have and make it publicly available, right? That's kind of what it is, and that's of course I mean, that's the whole thing behind open science, right? That you have your methods and made them available to others. So I think that motivation might get you pretty far, actually.
I mean, it's a public goods management problem eventually.
Here we go. Yeah.
Right. Here we go. Yeah. I mean, if you see some benefit, for example, in the data and learning something from the data that was already annotated there, but you need something else, let's say the payoff matrix, nothing prevents you to go through some matrices and to code them and maybe reach out for some further support. You can share this data with us. We can provide some support with some further annotation, and eventually this is going to result in a better outcome for you because you're going to get more data, but for the collective too. I mean, everybody benefits at the end, and that's a bit of the model that we had in mind. We think people are going to benefit from that. Maybe they want to add to this knowledge. Yeah.
Okay. So I find it so annoying almost that when you do something with cooperation, social interaction, everything becomes a game theoretic problem. But let's go there for a minute. So how do you create the incentive structures though that it doesn't become a prisoner's dilemma, but that it becomes something more cooperative, right? Because in setting up Coda, you could set it up so that it's, deadlock or whatever, or, in terms of people helping you. Have you thought from a game theoretic perspective how you can ensure that it becomes something where mutual cooperation is the the Nash equilibrium or something like that? Or
we had a lot of conversation about that, and to what extent we wanted to introduce, let's say, some kind of institutional control, and eventually, like, this leads to a lot of cascading decisions about how much you want to control. And we decided that we can't control that, and that eventually, like, it really it really depends on the individual motivation, and there is not much you can control about that unless you start really controlling every single step and really constraining people's action. And what we wanted to give was like full freedom and full ownership of the data and full flexibility. Because when you start controlling and constraining, it really goes a lot. Yeah.
So, I mean, you mentioned, if people have questions, whether they can contact you. So is that also, let's say you want a new factor to be added to Coda, like, for example, me with the payoff matrix or something. And imagine you don't have a podcast where you can just talk to the authors. Do you just send you an email and say, like, hey, I'm interested in the payoff matrix. Are you planning on adding it or whatever? Or how does...
Yeah, so... we're not like a company, so even if you use the contact form that you find in the Coda, the Cooperation Databank website, Dan and I are going to read the email. So if you're going to send an email through the form or you're directly in contact with Dan and I, we're very approachable, and we're going to figure out something together and see how the specific request can meet or whatever is going on, like from our side, and if we can meet in the middle, and if we can help each other and start a collaboration. So it's all very spontaneous. Yeah.
Okay, then I have my second request after payoff matrices is, are you also planning on adding other 2x2 games? So you have Prisoner's Dilemma, and then you have some studies where people use a Prisoner's Dilemma and maybe Chicken or Stag Hunt or something, but you haven't coded it for you don't want all 2x2 games, but let's say the symmetric ones or something that you also include studies that only use Stag Hunt or something like that. I don't know. It seems to me like you're mainly using Prisoner's Dilemma, right? And then if those studies also include other games, you have them too, but you're not, as far as I can tell, at least, you're not.
No, yeah, your intuition is correct. So if, like, let's say a study included multiple games, we only annotated those that were relevant according to the inclusion criteria. So of the data bank, which are like the game being a prisoner dilemma, a public goods dilemma, resource dilemma, and a resource dilemma, or some slight variation of those. So in this sense, like a chicken game wouldn't be annotated by our collaborators, and so you're not going to find it in there.
I'm pretty sure I did earlier. Like, I looked as one of the variables was like game type, and then it was prisoner, but there was also chicken to select.
Yeah. So you can select if you found a chicken dilemma a chicken game in our platform, you couldn't find it while filtering out based on game type. So if you are gonna filtering like what's the game that has been used, you're not gonna find that. You're only gonna find these games. But if the article report an effect size, let's say which summarize the difference between cooperation in a prisoner dilemma setting and in a chicken game, we have a variable to conceptualize a chicken game in our ontology. So you're going to find this effect size, but you can't really select studies based on employing a chicken game because they're simply not there. I don't know if I explained.
And you're not planning on adding that? Or?
No, it's actually like a point on our agenda, and we really want to expand the sort of data you can find in there, and adding more games is definitely one of the next challenge. And if we're still seeking for some collaborators who want to get on board and support with that.
By the way, is it really annoying that like you have this like great platform where you have like all this data available, and like the first thing people do is they say like, can you also do this thing?
No.
Like, why don't you have that thing?
No, we take it as a sign of enthusiasm, and we like it.
Yeah, that's true. It is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't ask you if I thought it was a waste of time. Obviously, I only asked because it seems really cool. But when you say you're looking for collaborators, for example, let's say for other game types or something, what would a collaborator do there?
So the way we organized the collaboration and people who worked with us in the past was that they all went through a training session with me, in which like they will really get acquainted with the data and how the data look like and how our annotation system look like to be able to be independent in annotating new information. And this is really a structured procedure. It takes some time, but it really makes people comfortable in saying, okay, I can do that. So based on what was their availability, they were assigned a group of studies of papers to annotate, and they were always in contact with me if they had any questions or something. So yeah.
Do the people require like a certain level of education, or can it be like, I don't know, let's say you have someone who wants to do a master's project or whatever, is that also fine, or do they have to like already know the field or have experience in it also?
No, we had, of course, it's required to have some familiarity with the field and with economic games in general. But we also had some collaborators from that were doing their master, and some of them were actually interested in doing a meta-analysis on cooperation eventually, and super motivated to learn. So yeah, nothing really prevents anybody to learn about that. Even with very little familiarity, we have our reference, and they go through this training, and there is a constant communication. It's very open. And I find it especially beneficial for people early in their career because of the benefits I was mentioning before, but also because it really gives you also a perspective on writing and on what you want and how you want to communicate your results in a research paper, let's say, because you know where to that when you read some result sections, they're very hard. It's very hard to locate the information, and it's a bit annoying. So you really want to be clear when you write your own result section, and yeah.
So yeah, in the worst case scenario is that you gain an appreciation of well-written method section.
Oh yeah.
Methods, yeah. I mean, if every method section was well written, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are like a couple of things that in which Coda can help for study reporting. So one thing would be that if you get familiar with the variables that we annotated, that for example, that are related to the study characteristics, so all the features of the experimental design, and you really know what they are, then you can check whether in your own reporting of an experimental method section, you're really covering all those points, because authors keep many things for granted and keep a lot of this knowledge implicit. Like, for example, for me, it's very hard sometimes to find information about the incentive in the game. Sometimes people don't really report whether participants were paid for that or no. So it's very common in econ papers and in psychology papers, let's say, run in online setting. But in the lab, it's really not super common, and it should be.
So you mean like whether people were paid for the responses in the game, or whether it was hypothetical?
No, even if they received like a show-up fee for participation, like a flat, because people think maybe that's not interesting, maybe that's not relevant, but it's actually good to be explicit, you know?
Yeah. So like studying whether, okay, I thought you literally meant, do you also have the variable whether the reward, the payoff was hypothetical or real?
Yeah.
So you have
exactly.
both, okay. I want to say, oh yeah. So I know you have tutorials on the website, but beyond that, for example, one thing that something I'm particularly thinking of right now is that I don't know how to do a meta-analysis. Like even if I want to do something, I don't actually know like what the steps are, how it works. Is that also something you guys assist with or collaborate with, or is it really? I mean, it sounds like you already have a lot to do. So, but you know what I mean. Like, is that also something where you, I don't know, act as a platform for connecting meta-analysis with people who just want to run one, or I don't know.
So what you can find in our website is really how best to navigate the platform to get like the meta-analytic outcomes, but also like to navigate all the other functions. And we also had a dilemma about, okay, but what kind of information about meta-analysis per se we want to convey? And eventually we end up deciding that a lot of people are doing that and are focusing their research on developing meta-analytic methods and meta-analytic software. So this was not like our... there are like a lot of people that can do a better job, let's say, training in the meta-analytic methods. So as an example, like all our software on our research platform runs on R-Shiny, and the computation that are specific to meta-analysis are implemented using the Meta4R package that is developed by Wolfgang Fichtbauer. So if you need to learn something about meta-analysis and the computation behind that, it's better just to be redirected to the people who work with that. Like
okay, yeah. I was just curious, particularly because Daniel has, he does have the expertise, right, in running meta-analyses.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, what we can really all we can do is talk about like meta-analysis, about cooperation, and the specific decisions that underlie like a meta-analysis on cooperation. Because then, okay, there is nothing like the general meta-analytic method. There is nothing like performing a general meta-analysis. There are a lot of choices one should make, and we can be knowledgeable about that specific part. But I think there are like a lot of amazing resources out there on the general,
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, like I had that question when, I wrote that question down before, like whether you guys help it and it made sense. But when I was just saying it, I realized like, wait, you already have so much to do. Like you can't, like it doesn't sound like it's even like just physically possible for you guys to also do all of that whilst you're trying to set up and maintain this data bank. Yeah, no. So I completely understand that you can't do everything.
Well, but what we could do and what we do have in our website is a list of useful resources. We redirect people who are interested in more specific function like meta-analysis or power analysis or other things that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like, because part of what I was thinking, like in the thing I was thinking of is that it would be really cool to do. So like just see whether this effect also persists in, across all the other literature. But in a way, I did do a few controlled experiments. And am I really going to put in all the effort just to see whether, it works in all the other contexts when I feel like my study should in a way already be pretty confident that the effect is there, right? So it's a bit of a, like, am I willing to put in the effort to learn how to run a meta-analysis just for something that I think should already, I should already have the evidence for it, but
I mean, you can learn some other stuff with the meta-analysis. You can get like, let's say, an estimate of how much publication bias is out there, and this is not something that you can learn if you perform an individual study. So you get a sense of what's the effect in your specific set of circumstances that led you to that specific result, but you can't really assess like how much like the literature that is already out there is reliable and is going to replicate in the future with your own study. So there are some benefits also in having a meta-analytic approach instead.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually also, this is the kind of slightly weird thing. So there's this paper by, I don't know who it's by. I can't remember, but by the way, I always put all the papers and stuff we talk about as a description in the description, so I'll put it there. But there's something that someone did recently, which is about like single paper meta-analyses, where they basically say like if you have several experiments on the same thing, they have like also like a probably also Shiny Apps thing where you can put in you do a meta-analysis over, let's say, your 3 or 4 studies in your experiments. So in a way, I kind of plan on doing that already. But yeah, some of running a full meta-analysis sounds, like, as you said, it's work.
I mean, that's still a different thing, because if you run an internal meta-analysis, meaning like a meta-analysis of the set of studies that you conduct, you can get like a good sense like of the average effect that you get. Like it's like if you want to summarize the finding on your paper in a single matrix, and here you go. But still, it doesn't add much to comparing that to the existing.
Yeah, no, it would be summary. I mean, in this case in particular, because we did a few experiments and one of them, for example, didn't show any differences that we expected. So there's the question like, okay, what does the cumulatively, what do the studies say? Yeah, no, you're right. Those are 2 different things. See, I just keep thinking of new things you guys should add, which is very rude. But again, you said you think of it as enthusiasm. But this is a genuine question. So like with, like what you're doing is already a huge amount of work and already very cool. But for example, like with our study, we plan on putting, all the data public. So you could actually have the trials, every single trial of every person you could have. Is there any way of like incorporating that in the future into your thing, or is that just a completely different level of detail, or rather than just having like an effect for a study, rather actually being able to include all the trials and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it's a different thing, because what are like the observations and the individual observation in a study that you collect are like, let's say, it can be the participants, or can be a group or a trial or whatever. But what we use as an observation in our data model is an effect. So the way the data are, let's say, even structured in an Excel file that can come up from your study and from the data bank is different. So we would still need like some kind of intermediate step to translate the former into the latter.
I mean, that would actually be almost very beneficial for the field, right? If you guys just set a standard like column 1 is this, column 2 is that, column 3 is this. I don't know whether that makes any sense for studies that can differ so much, but
I mean, there is like right now a movement in science about how best to, let's say, to create code books and to share the data in a way that is as standardized as possible. So there is some work that is moving in that direction, and I think it's pretty cool, and I think we can use that as well. But right now, what we can give as a guideline maybe could be like the definitions of the concept, like we have in our ontology, for example, that really define some kind of rough structure of all the variables that have been studied in relation with cooperation. But regarding like how really to store the data and the data model, that's a different, entirely different world.
Yeah, no, as I said, like it sounds like you've got enough on your plate as it is. By the way, do you have like specific people who just do the programming of the website or the programming of the database or whatever, or is it literally just, I don't know, you and I don't know exactly who's involved? I mean, it's on the website, but it's...
No, we have a big team. And indeed, you can like check all the names and see all the faces on our website. But our team is, I can describe it as roughly divided in domain experts, who are like really the people who work with cooperation and who are knowledgeable of cooperation studies, and computer scientists, who are the people who supported us with everything to relate and pertains to the knowledge representation and to the actual implementation of the infrastructure. And then there are some people in the middle of those fields, like my colleague Simon Columbus, which was really super, super helpful in developing the Shiny app and the R script that is behind the research interface. So not all of us are involved with all the tasks, and that makes sense. That makes complete sense.
Yeah. By the way, what, as a kind of maybe final question about the data bank, like how was So first you were hired to work on that project, right? Like you knew you were going to work on this. Okay, yeah. So how was that? How did it turn out differently than you expected? Like, you went in with a certain, assuming a certain expectation of what the work was going to be like. And then, yeah, I'm just curious, like working on this kind of big, like creating a framework kind of project, like, I don't know, how was it?
To be honest, when I transitioned from my PhD, there was like the time in which you ask what you want to do next and how you want to bring your research or career to the next level. And there came this opportunity. And this was described me very honestly by then at the beginning as an appointment that was super focusing on the annotation and on the data curation and on the coordination of this a big group of people. So I knew exactly what I was about to face, and I actually was excited. I also thought that's a nice way to keep thinking about what you want to do in the meantime. But then it really became something bigger because if you turn your attention out of the Excel file you're working on and annotating number after number, you see what it's growing. So I started thinking about my own meta-analytic projects and my own vision and I learned that I could make a difference and I could shape the way the future line of research somehow and influence the field in some way, in some positive way, I thought. So that was unexpected and was super rewarding. And to be honest, at the end of the day, when I was tired from all the super detailed annotation, that really kept my motivation up. But my expectations were like the job was described in a very realistic way, and but was much more than that.
How do you think about like the kind of work you're doing? Because so one thing I was struck by when I thought about like what it would be like to kind of set up this project is that, how should I say, like obviously it's a very, I agree, like this is a really, can be a very impactful kind of project, right? Where you can really help lots of people do lots of really cool things. But in a way, it sounds to me that it doesn't have this kind of almost scientific kind of, how should we say, like it's almost not doing science, but creating a framework for other people to do science. Is that something that, if I got that correctly, then I don't know. I'm not really sure what my question exactly here is. I don't know, like, is that, do you think about it that way, or do you just think about it in terms of the contribution or something?
So at the end, this entire project turned out way more meta-sciencey than what I expected it to be. But during like my work, I had the possibility to develop some ideas that were really like about cooperation and that could help to answer some questions related to cooperation, such as, for example, whether cooperation varies across societies or which are like the cross-cultural factors that can account for the variation that we observe. So I start thinking about some project to answer to some question, and this data for me were like the way to achieve that goal. So it was just that I didn't conduct, let's say, experimental research per se, but it really helped me. I think at the end of the day, I could also give like some kind of theoretical contribution and not only like a meta-scientific contribution. And so all the other people who worked in the project, like our lab has many meta-analyses going on at the moment. And many of these people were involved with the annotation of these studies, but this really didn't prevent to ask interesting questions about cooperation per se.
The lab must have like a lot of meta-analysis coming out soon, right? Like you're the first people to be able to use this database. You know how to use it. You've got your questions. You can just run with it, right?
I mean, that's a little bit of a competitive advantage, but still, like the project we're working on, that are not all of them out yet, are going to be based on the same data that is out right now. So it's not really competitive in this way.
No, I mean, I didn't even mean it in that sense. I meant it more like in terms of like, I imagine like for someone like Daniel, who, as far as I can tell, has, largely been doing meta-analyses for most of his career. This must be just like fantastic, right? Because he now just has this tool that I assume he wished he had this 10 years ago, right?
And you're assuming right. And when we were testing the interface, like when it was developed first, like he was so excited. He ran like hundreds of meta-analyses in like 1 hour, and he's like, "Oh, I'm running one meta-analysis after the other." So like that was very fun. But I could see the enthusiasm, and yeah, it was a bit wild with the meta-analysis.
Yeah. Yeah, he's probably going to have like a phase after that, like when he has to adjust. Like, when he did like all the meta-analysis in like 1 year, and then he has to like calm down a bit when like he's already like done everything he wants to do. Yeah.
Well, from what I learned, there is always going to be more. So I can't wait to see what's coming next.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, how long are you still working on that project? Like, I'm assuming your contract is not unlimited.
I started working at the end of 2017, and then I had another appointment, and now I'm back again at the VU in the cooperation in the Amsterdam Cooperation Lab. But although I still have some responsibilities with the data bank, my new appointment is not entirely oriented to that. I'm also doing other research. But of course, as a co-director, I'm still involved.
Yeah, the co-director still have to do something. But is okay. So now it's kind of you're working mainly on other stuff, and this is using your knowledge of the field and the database itself. The data bank is so it's more like a supervisory role now rather than.
Yeah, I'm less hands-on with the data. I'm not annotating any new stuff, but I'm coordinating and supervising. So that's the role right now. But I'm sure that during the next round of annotation and when it's gonna start, this can probably change. I also see some benefit in keep on annotating stuff. Maybe not full time, but yeah.
Yeah. So what are you working on now, or what's kind of next for you? If obviously you don't have to say all your secret ideas, but in the broad strokes.
No, I'm really focusing on the meta-analysis right now because it has been like 2 years in the making. So for me, it's really time to wrap it up and send it out there. And really, I can't wait to share the findings with the community too, and not just staring at them myself alone. But we have some other projects that are related to the new grant that Dan was awarded because he got another ERC grant recently. So we're starting, super well done. And we're starting to really work on interdependence and using experience sampling method and bringing that to a more global, let's say, level.
Can you say something about that? I'm curious what like the experience sample, or you don't have to if you don't want to.
No, it's still in the making, so there is not much I should be able. I'm not able to share more right now because we haven't started yet. So
I see.
Simple as that.
You mentioned earlier a few times, kind of that you like the contribution to the field that you're doing with Coda on a kind of long-term career scale. Do you have like a contribution you want to make, a specific thing, or is it kind of just, I don't know, like how do you think about that kind of like long-term career and work you do?
To be honest, I haven't been so strategic to think about the long-term horizon with that. Not at all. But one thing that for me is very rewarding already is that my reputation changed a little bit. Not like changed, but if some people read my name or anything out there in the web, they think, oh, those are truly cooperative people that are working for the common good. And to me, that's amazing. That's just the best thing that can happen. from a career perspective. But then I don't know. I think the main long-term benefit that I see is going to be really changing the mindset related to the project and what you want to do. Like now, I really feel like with the next grant, I will apply to. I want to make a difference. And also, I want my work to be helpful for others and not for myself. That's like a take almost that I got from this project.
That's pretty good. I mean, no, I mean, like I guess it is like an inherently kind of community thing, right? Where you take all the studies from other people, you make it available for everyone. It very much seems like a kind of from the people for the people kind of thing. Without wanting to be too grand here, but yeah, no, I mean, I'm looking forward to kind of trying it out, seeing whether I can do the things I want to try out with it. So you mentioned briefly like the workshops. So as I said, this one won't be public for that one, but is that kind of something you're doing quite a lot?
So we're planning to do like a series of workshops. Like at the beginning, they're mainly gonna revolve around navigating the function of Coda and really like showing firsthand and working with people to understand how to use the platform in a way that can serve the research purpose. But in the future, once like people are going to be acquainted with the platform and the possibility of the data, we really want to start like some kind of meetings to think about research ideas and to create research networks and even to think about possible avenues for these for the data bank, what we can add and because people have always like good ideas and thoughts like, hey, why don't you do that? And maybe it's something we never thought of because we were already really focused on what was on the table. But yeah, so we're going to have these opportunities, and every time we will plan to disseminate them in like channels like Twitter or some mailing list, some relevant mailing list. But if you check like our website, we have a news section. So just check it out like every now and then because some events can be on the making.
Yeah, but you do have a mailing list or not?
No, we don't have a Coda mailing list because we really didn't want to spam people and to be intrusive with that. But I mean, if you're interested and you really want to you don't want to miss like the next opportunity, just send us an email and we're just gonna keep you in the loop for every future communication.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm assuming right now everything's still digital, like online, and then maybe at some point, once COVID is over, then at some point maybe in person. But I'm assuming right now it's online.
Yes, right now it's online, but I very much look forward to transition to a face-to-face setting.
Yeah, are you going to put those like online, the workshops, something like for people who don't have time during the time, putting it on YouTube or something? Is that
I don't know about the next one, but definitely also because it's a bit hard to find a time in the day that is inclusive for all people, like in all the time zones. So like with the time that we usually work with, like people in Japan it's not really easy for them to join. So it's a good idea to publish them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.